Hey, I'm Travis Black for Alchemy Education, and I'm here to help you with your chemistry. Looking at the problem that's been provided to us, this right here is what's known as a stoichiometry problem. And stoichiometry is just a big fancy chemistry word for cooking with chemistry. That's exactly what it is. And just like in cooking, it's kind of best to have a recipe. And so that's been provided here for us. When we look at the information, it gives us right here 2.0 grams of O2. That's our starting amount. So if I were to go into my kitchen and start to make some French toast, I'd pull out the loaf of bread, and however much I had in my loaf would be my starting amount. Same thing happens here. In this case, our starting amount is 2.0 grams of O2. But in order to do something with that amount, we're going to have to do some sort of conversion. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have to convert it into what's known as the mole. Chemistry doesn't happen on a gram-to-gram basis. Likewise, when you're cooking in the kitchen, not everything uses the same amount. I may be using slices of bread, but when I go to the milk, I'm going to be using quarter cups. And so I'm going to have to make sure that whatever I've been provided is changed into whatever my recipe calls for. In chemistry and chemical equations, that recipe is always the mole, always the mole. When we look at what's being asked, it's asking for what is the percent yield. And that's just a way of measuring how good you are at performing your experiment. In order to do percent yield is defined as the actual amount, what we can make in the lab, divided by the theoretical amount. In this case, that would be according to the math, how much can we make? And then lastly, like all percentages, times 100. And so in this case, we have our actual yield. It tells us right here that our actual yield is going to be 1.40 grams of N2, in which case we know that we have 1.40 grams of N2. So what we need is the theoretical. And the only way to find that then is through math. Luckily, all stoichiometry problems are done in the same 3 steps, every single time without fail. Step 1 is if you do not have moles, convert it into moles. And so that's where we're going to begin. Looking at what we have, we've been provided with 2.0 grams of O2. But in order to use our recipe, we have to convert that into moles. And since we have grams, the way to do that is with molar mass. Looking at a periodic table, a single oxygen atom has a molar mass of 16 grams per mole. But since we have an O2 molecule, 2 oxygens bonded together, that means then we're going to have to use the molar mass of the 2 added. So the molar mass of O2 then would be 32.00 grams of O2 for every 1 mole of O2. And we set it up in this way so that our words cancel. That's the whole point of this process, is our words cancel and we get it into whatever we're asking for. That means at the end of step 1, we now know that we have 0.0625 moles of O2. Now it's in a form we can use our equation, we can use our recipe. And that brings us to step 2. Step 2, now that we have moles, use your equation to convert from one substance into another. Well, when we look at it, we're trying to get N2. And so we're provided this, or we've calculated this 0.0625 moles of O2. And when we look at our equation, there's 1 O2 for every 1 N2. So that means then, getting rid of the unit we have, for every 1 mole of O2, there's 1 mole of N2. So at the end of our second step, we would still have 0.0625 moles, but this time it's going to be of N2. We've used our equation to change from one chemical into another, just like I would use my French toast recipe to go from bread into milk and vary it based on how much I had and needed. Lastly, then, would be to convert our provided or our calculated amount of moles, 0.0625 moles of N2, into grams. And again, we go back to the periodic table. If 1 atom has a mass of 14 grams per mole, then a molecule of 2 atoms would have a mass of 28.01 grams of N2 for every 1 mole of N2. That means then our theoretical yield would be approximately 1.77 grams. Now that we have our theoretical and we have our actual, we can finish it out by doing the actual 1.40 divided by the theoretical 1.77, and that's going to be equal to 79.10%. I hope this helps.